All right, so we're diving into a case that I think has really stayed with a lot of people, the Caylee Anthony case,
Oh, absolutely.
the disappearance and death of her daughter, Caylee.
It's one of those just,
Yeah,
it's tragic and it's
captivating.
it's complicated.
Yeah, and we've got some really interesting sources to pull from today. Excerpts from People magazine, a Wikipedia deep dive on Caylee's death, and a forensic analysis from the Alcatraz East Crime Museum website.
Wow.
So,
That's a lot to unpack.
a lot to unpack, so let's set the scene.
Okay.
June 16, 2008. Casey and Caylee leave the Anthony family home in Florida and then silence
Yeah.
for 31 days.
That's a long time.
Nobody knows where they are.
A huge red flag right there.
Right.
I mean, just in any missing persons case, that initial time period is so crucial.
Absolutely.
And in forensic psychology, we talk about the importance of that early window
Yeah.
for gathering information, for understanding the timeline.
And the longer it goes,
The more difficult it
the
becomes
more difficult it becomes.
to piece together what really happened.
Right. And then finally, July 15, 2008, the silence is broken. Casey's mother, Cindy, makes that frantic 911 call.
Oh, I remember that call.
And I think a lot of people do. She reports Caylee missing, and there's this chilling statement.
Oh, yeah.
She tells the dispatcher that Casey's car smells like a dead body's been inside.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine being that dispatcher,
Oh, my God.
taking that call?
That detail instantly raises the stakes.
Absolutely.
And then the investigation kicks into high gear.
And as the police start digging, what do they find? Lies.
Lies.
Inconsistencies. Casey's story starts to unravel.
She tells him about this fictional nanny, this Zenaida Zanny Fernandez Gonzalez.
A name that will forever be etched in true crime history.
Right.
And then this made-up job at Universal Studios. It's like she's building a wall of deception.
With every lie, another brick is added, and then there's the physical evidence they can't ignore.
Right.
They find a single strand of human hair in the trunk of Casey's car.
And this hair was microscopically similar to Caylee's?
So are we talking DNA match?
Well, not quite. The hair didn't have the root.
Oh, right.
So they couldn't do a full DNA analysis.
Okay.
They did mitochondrial DNA testing, though.
And what does that tell you?
It can only confirm the female lineage, so they could say it came from a female on the Anthony family line.
So it could be Caylee's, but...
They couldn't say for certain.
Right.
It wasn't a slam dunk, but it definitely added to the suspicion.
Absolutely. And then there was that whole debate about the smell in the trunk.
Oh, the odor analysis.
They bring in Dr. Vass, who says he detected the odor of human decomposition.
Now, this was big because he claimed that almost all the compounds found in the early stages of decomposition were present in those air samples.
Wow, but that seems pretty subjective, right?
Exactly, and that's where the defense came in strong. They argued that odor analysis wasn't reliable enough for a definitive conclusion.
I can see that.
Their expert, Dr. Furton, pointed out that a key compound associated with human decomposition, undecane, was missing.
Undecane.
Yeah, it's a chemical released as a body breaks down.
So if it's not there, then...
Then it raises questions about whether that smell was really from a decomposing body or something else.
So the prosecution said it smells like decomposition?
Yeah.
The defense says not so fast.
Exactly. It's a forensic tug of war.
And to make things even more complicated, they found a stained paper towel in the trash in the trunk.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
And it tested positive for adipose serum.
Also known as grave wax.
Grave wax.
It's a fatty substance that forms during decomposition.
So that seems incriminating.
It does, but the defense argued that adipose serum can also form from fatty acids found in common garbage.
So maybe it was just from the trash in the trunk.
Right, the jury had to weigh the possibilities.
Okay, and then there's the chloroform.
Ah, yes, the chloroform.
High levels were found in the trunk, confirmed by both Dr. Vass and the FBI lab.
This is where the story takes a dark turn, because the prosecution suggests Casey used chloroform to subdue Caylee.
Subdue her so she could...
Well, they didn't explicitly say for what purpose.
Right.
But the implication was there.
To make her stop crying or to...
Potentially.
Yeah.
But again, the defense countered, arguing there's no way to prove that's where the chloroform came from.
Right, it could have been from something else in the car.
Exactly. Another unanswered question.
And then, as if things weren't complicated enough, we've got insects entering the scene.
Oh, right, the bug experts.
Dr. Haskell, the prosecution's expert, testifies that he found insects in the trunk commonly associated with decaying flesh.
Now, insect activity can be a valuable tool in forensic investigations.
Right.
It can help establish a timeline of decomposition.
Right.
But the defense wasn't going to let that stand unchallenged.
Of course not.
They brought in their own bug expert, Dr. Huntington.
And what did he say?
He argued that those insects are also attracted to garbage.
Which there was plenty of in the trunk.
Exactly. So the jury was left to grapple with these competing interpretations of what the bugs might reveal.
Okay, so we've got the smell, the paper towel, the chloroform, the bugs. It's like every piece of evidence leads to more questions than answers.
It really does. And then just when you think it can't get more complicated, we have the cyber evidence.
Ah, the internet searches.
Yes, the prosecution highlights Casey's online searches for things like chloroform and self-defense.
Seems pretty damning right.
On the surface, absolutely, but the defense throws a curveball.
What's that?
Cindy, Casey's mother, claims she made those searches, not Casey.
Oh, wow. So she's trying to protect her daughter.
It seems that way, but then her alibi falls apart.
How so?
Work records showed she was at work during the time of those searches.
Oh.
So was it Casey trying to learn about chloroform and self-defense, or was it her mother, and if so, why?
It just keeps getting more and more tangled.
It does, and then there's the duct tape.
The duct tape, what about it?
It was found near Caylee's remains, and the prosecution presented it as the murder weapon.
Oh, wow.
They even used a graphic animation in court showing how it could have been used to suffocate Caylee.
So they were trying to paint a very vivid picture for the jury.
Exactly. But the defense countered with a surprising detail. Caylee's jawbone was still attached to her skull.
And what's the significance of that?
They argued that's unusual in decomposed bodies unless something was holding it together.
Interesting.
They suggested it wasn't duct tape, but rather the hair leaf litter and roots that kept the jaw attached.
So this seemingly minor detail becomes a point of debate.
It highlights how even straightforward evidence can be interpreted in multiple ways.
So we've got this puzzle of evidence, expert opinions clashing, and family dynamics, adding another layer of complexity.
This case is a true crime labyrinth.
It really is, and we've only just scratched the surface,
We haven't even gotten to the trial yet.
which is where things get even more fascinating.
Absolutely, stay tuned because we're about to dive into the legal battle that captivated the nation.
That's right. We'll be back with part 2 after a quick break.
That trial started on May 24th, 2011 in Orlando, Florida.
Oh, yeah.
It was a huge media spectacle.
I bet it was like everyone's glued to the coverage trying to make sense of it all.
Exactly. The nation was captivated trying to figure out what happened to Caylee and who was responsible.
So with all that attention, how did the prosecution and the defense even begin to present their cases?
Well, the prosecution, they really focused on Casey's behavior after Caylee disappeared. They laid out all the lies, the inconsistencies, the suspicious actions.
Right, like they were trying to paint a picture of her as
someone who wanted to be free from the responsibilities of being a mother.
So you're saying they were implying that she saw Caylee as a burden?
Yeah, essentially they argued that she wanted to live a carefree life without being tied down.
Wow, that's a pretty harsh accusation.
It is, and they really honed in on that motive, portraying her as selfish and more interested in partying than taking care of her daughter.
So what about the defense? What was their strategy?
Well, they had a tough case to argue, let's be honest.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
But they went with a bold approach.
Okay.
Their main argument was that Caylee's death was an accident, specifically drowning in the family pool. Yeah, and they claimed that George Casey's father panicked when he found her.
Oh, wow.
And helped cover it up, maybe out of fear or a misguided attempt to protect Casey.
So they're shifting the blame to the grandfather.
Exactly. It was a huge twist. And then they went even further.
How so?
They brought up some really serious allegations against George during the trial.
Like what?
They claimed that he had sexually abused Casey for years, starting when she was a child.
Oh my gosh, that changes things completely.
It did. It added another layer of complexity to an already complicated case.
So they were suggesting that this alleged abuse could explain Casey's behavior.
Right. They argued that the trauma could have led to her erratic actions and her involvement in covering up Caylee's death.
Wow, and how did George Anthony respond to all of this?
He completely denied the abuse allegations, both on the stand and in later interviews.
It must have been incredibly difficult for him to face those accusations.
Absolutely. It was a shocking claim that really divided the family and left the public wondering if there was some dark secret hidden within the Anthony family.
So we have these two completely opposite stories. Lots of evidence that's open to interpretation and a family drama unfolding in the courtroom. It's hard to imagine what the jury was thinking.
It was a lot to process, and after weeks of testimony and legal arguments, the jury reached a verdict that shocked many people.
What was it?
Not guilty on the most serious charges.
Not guilty. So she wasn't convicted of killing Caylee.
That's right. The jury acquitted Caylee Anthony of first-degree murder, aggravated child abuse, and aggravated manslaughter.
I can't believe it after all that evidence in the prosecution's arguments.
It was a controversial verdict for sure. A lot of people were outraged.
I bet. But if she was innocent, why all the lies and the strange behavior?
Well, the jury didn't completely let her off the hook.
What do you mean?
They did find her guilty on 4 counts of providing false information to law enforcement.
Oh, right, all those lies about the nanny and her job.
Exactly. So she was convicted of lying, but not of killing her daughter.
So a mixed verdict. In a way, a verdict that's still debated to this day.
Absolutely.
So what happened next?
Well, Casey was sentenced to 4 years in prison for those lying convictions.
4 years.
But she had already served enough time while awaiting trial.
Oh, wow.
So she was released just 10 days after the verdict.
I can only imagine the public reaction.
There was a lot of anger. A lot of people felt that justice hadn't been served.
It's understandable the case had become such a huge public spectacle.
It really had. It was a whirlwind for everyone involved.
So what happened to Casey after she was released? Did she try to rebuild her life?
She did. She made a few attempts to create a new life outside of the shadow of that trial.
Like what?
Well, in 2016, she started a photography business.
Really?
Yeah, she called it case photography.
That's,
A little on the nose, right?
yeah, I mean, given everything that happened.
But it reportedly didn't last very long.
And then I read somewhere that she tried to become a private investigator.
That's right. In 2020, she filed paperwork to start a PI business.
But can she even do that with a felony conviction?
That's the irony. She couldn't actually get a PI license in Florida because she's a convicted felon.
Oh, wow. So it's kind of a dead end from the start.
It seems that way. Some people speculated that she was interested in helping others who were facing legal troubles, particularly women who claimed they were wrongly accused.
So maybe trying to use her experience in a positive way.
Possibly, but those business ventures didn't really pan out.
Did she ever speak publicly about the case after the trial?
She mostly kept a low profile for a few years, but then in 2017, she gave a series of interviews to the Associated Press.
Really?
Yeah, it was the first time she spoke out since her acquittal.
I wonder what she said.
She maintained that she didn't know what happened to Caylee in those final moments.
Did she offer any explanation for her behavior or her lies?
Not really. She just expressed understanding for the public's anger towards her and said she was okay with herself despite it all.
Wow, it's hard to imagine living under that kind of scrutiny and judgment.
It must have been incredibly difficult, but the story doesn't end there.
What do you mean?
In 2022, she participated in a Peacock documentary called Caylee Anthony, Where the Truth Lies.
Another documentary.
Yeah, and in this one, she changed her story.
How so?
She placed the blame squarely on her father, George.
You're kidding.
Nope. She claimed that he found Caylee drowned in the pool and implied that he staged the whole thing to cover up the alleged sexual abuse.
Wow. So now, years after the trial, she's presenting this completely new version of events.
Yeah, it was a huge bombshell that reignited public interest in the case.
So what was the reaction from her parents to these new accusations?
George was furious. He vehemently denied everything, just like he did during the trial.
I bet.
Cindy, though, seemed less certain.
Really?
Yeah, she kind of hinted that Casey might still be holding back the truth.
Wow, so even within the family, there's still this doubt and uncertainty.
It's fascinating, isn't it? This case just keeps twisting and turning even all these years later.
It really does. So after all the investigations, the trial, the documentaries, did we ever get a definitive answer about what happened to Caylee?
Sadly, no. The exact circumstances of her death remain a mystery.
It's a heartbreaking reality.
It is, and it's a reminder that sometimes, even with all the advances in forensic science and legal expertise, the truth can remain elusive.
I guess that's the frustrating thing about this case. There's no closure, no clear resolution.
And that's something we have to grapple with sometimes in these complex cases.
The Caylee Anthony case didn't just affect the Anthony family, though, did it? It had a much wider impact.
Absolutely. It sparked national conversations about how the media covers trials, the role of forensic evidence, and how we as a society deal with these kinds of ambiguous cases.
Cases where there are no easy answers.
Exactly. And I think it also challenged a lot of people's perceptions about justice and guilt.
Right, like it made us question the legal system and its ability to always deliver clear-cut outcomes.
And one of the most significant impacts was the creation of Caylee's Law.
Can you remind us what that is?
Sure. So after Caylee's disappearance, there was a lot of public outrage over the fact that it took so long for her to be reported missing.
Yeah, a whole month.
Right. And that led to a movement to hold parents accountable for not reporting missing children promptly.
So Caylee's Law is about making sure that doesn't happen again.
Exactly. Several states have enacted versions of Caylee's law making it a felony to delay reporting a child missing, especially if there's reason to believe the child is in danger.
That's a powerful legacy that came out of this tragedy.
It is, in a way, Caylee's story continues to protect children.
So what about Casey? Where is she now? What's she doing with her life?
Well, as of March 2025, she's made a rather unexpected debut on TikTok.
TikTok. Really?
Yeah, she's also started a Substack newsletter and claims she wants to be a legal advocate, particularly for women's rights and the LGBTQ plus community.
Wow. That's a pretty big shift from where she was a few years ago.
It is. She seems to be trying to find a new path for herself, to redefine herself in the public eye.
It's a bold move considering her past.
It certainly is. Only time will tell if she'll be able to successfully navigate this new chapter.
I guess we'll have to wait and see. You know, it's amazing to me how even after the trial and all the documentaries, people are still talking about this case, still trying to figure it out.
Yeah, it really gets under your skin, doesn't it?
It does. It makes you think about justice and guilt
Hmm.
and what truth even means.
And right, and I think that's what makes this case so compelling. You have all this evidence, but it's all open to interpretation. There's no smoking gun.
And everybody seems to have a different theory about what happened to Caylee.
That's the thing about cases like this. We're looking for a simple answer, guilty or innocent. But the Caylee Anthony case, it just doesn't fit neatly into those categories.
It's like a puzzle with some pieces missing.
Exactly. And I think that's frustrating for a lot of people. We want a resolution, a clear sense of who's right and who's wrong, but sometimes that's just not possible.
It makes you realize that even with all our technology and expertise, we don't always get the answers we're looking for.
And it forces us to confront the limits of our knowledge and the fact that the legal system isn't perfect.
Right. And as you said before, this case had an impact far beyond the courtroom.
Oh, absolutely. It sparked so many conversations about how trials are covered in the media, the role of forensic science, how we as a society handle these really difficult cases.
Cases where the truth is hard to pin down.
Yeah, exactly. I think it also made people question their own biases, how we form judgments based on the information we're given.
It's like this case held a mirror up to society in a way.
I think so. And it's interesting to see how Caylee herself is navigating all of this now, trying to redefine herself in the public eye.
Yeah, with the TikTok and the newsletter, it's a pretty bold move.
It is. She's trying to shift the narrative, move away from the accusations and the trial and start a new chapter.
Do you think she'll be successful?
It's hard to say. The public perception of her is pretty ingrained, but I guess time will tell.
Well, this deep dive into the Caylee Anthony case has been truly fascinating and disturbing at the same time.
It really is a story that stays with you.
It makes you realize that some mysteries might never be solved.
And that's a tough pill to swallow sometimes.
It is, but I think it's important to keep asking the questions even if we don't have all the answers.
I agree. It's those questions that keep us thinking, keep us engaged with these complex issues.
Well, thank you so much for guiding us through this incredible deep dive. It's been a really thought-provoking experience.
It's been my pleasure. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this journey into one of the most perplexing criminal cases in recent history. It's a story that continues to challenge our assumptions about truth, justice, and the human condition. We may never have all the answers, but the Caylee Anthony case reminds us that the pursuit of understanding is a journey worth taking.
And that's what we're all about here on The Deep Dive, exploring the complexities of the world around us.